Good morning, my friends. How are we feeling today? Yeah? Are we awake? Are we awake? What? What? Maybe? How are we aware? Aware? Maybe a little bit webby? I know webby is not a spiritual term, but I'm going to say it anyway. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, today is talk 3. And yes, I did say 3, Mike. Today is talk 3 of 5 in our sacred symbol chapter on the web. And I want to name right up front what I think is happening in these series, because I observe as I go. I don't plan. Anybody who spent a day with me understands I do not plan. Ever, right? You see Mona in the front row going, no. I don't. So I get to sit back and observe as these things line up. And what I see in the pattern that is unfolding is that talk 1 was about the quiet revelation that the web of life is already holding us. And talk 2 was about what it means to live like we know that it's true. How presence and compassion strengthen the whole. And today is the hinge. Okay? It is the place where we turn from understanding to embodying. Because once you can feel the web, once you recognize that you're already connected to everything, the next truth shows up, whether you will it to or not. Kind of like that Ethel Barnhart quote from last week. You are not only held by the web, you are one of its builders. And before anybody starts panicking, no, I am not giving you a spiritual chore list again. There will be no blueprints and there will be no building plans, but if that is your thing, please see Mike in the front, because we have a labyrinth that needs building and we can use some hands. But today, this is not a try harder talk. This is an open your eyes and notice your power talk. Because your life is already weaving. The only question is whether you're weaving consciously or unconsciously. So let's begin the way we always begin, with words that arrived in this world long before we did. Our first reading this morning came from the Apostle Paul's first letter to the Church of Corinth, known as the Book of Corinthians. And this is where he describes the body of humanity. But make no mistake, this is not only Paul's interpretation of things. Remember, he was a disciple, an original disciple of Jesus, and Jesus recorded throughout the Gospels and apocryphal texts. He's recorded as saying the same thing over and over in both very much these same terms as well as in parable and in kind of a removed perspective that invites introspection. But I love Paul's version here. He says it so simply and so radically that we almost miss the bigger picture. The body is not one member, but many. The foot can't declare independence from the hand. I read head, it's the hand. The eye cannot dismiss the ear. And then he says the line that tells you he isn't trying to be poetic. He's being pointedly accurate. He says, when one member suffers, all suffer with it. And when one is honored, all rejoice with it. In other words, whether we want to admit it or not, we're not separate. Not spiritually, not emotionally, not biologically, believe it or not. Not socially. We are one body. And yes, sometimes that's comforting, right? And sometimes it's inconvenient. Because it means that what we do to one another matters. Right? Not morally, although morals are significant societal and social cornerstones. I get that. What I'm saying is that it's sometimes mechanically less than we want to do. Okay, what do I mean by that? I mean that it is really comfortable to sit back and be a spectator. It's even easier to sit back behind our screens and spectate loudly in typed words. Okay? It can feel inconvenient to be the answer to someone's unspoken prayer. Sometimes you just don't want to get up and tend to the needs of another limb, or another organ, an eye, an ear, a heart, right? But don't feel discouraged if you identify with that and then start dreading the doing. Because just when we begin to think that living in the web meant taking on really tough chores, right? Based on what Paul said, Ernest Holmes comes sweeping in with the second reading this morning, and he does what Ernest always does. He aims the flashlight inward. He says, if you think you've lost opportunities, you stand right now at limitless opportunity. And then he says something that I find profoundly liberating. He says, know that there is no condemnation. For nothing can condemn unless we believe in condemnation. In other words, you don't have to fight the world. You don't have to wrestle everyone into agreement. You don't have to correct the planet. It needs no correction. Your work is to notice where your own mind is placing limitation or bondage and loosen it. He even quotes Jesus from John 11:44 when he says, loose him and let him go. And I will translate that into our language today. Loosen the thought. The narrative of belief around all things. This stuff that keeps our heads so busy and our lives so distracted. Lose the judgment, the rights and the wrongs and the bads, the goods. Lose the fear. Because the fear in your mind only lives there. You can't know what will or won't happen, no matter how much that inner voice of dread tries to convince you otherwise, right? And it's pretty convincing sometimes. Lose the old story. To quote Jamie Lula in one of my favorite songs, you're not the things you tell yourself you are, not the opinions of others or old scars. You are the light of the world. Lose all of that, because holding on to it is not only imprisoning you, it tugs on the whole web. Because again, Paul told us that when one member is in pain, all members suffer with it. And I'm going to put my own spin on it here and say, if one member shines, all the other members light up along with it. Do you choose to shine or to suffer now that you see it's all connected? And then in our third inspirational this reading came the poem, Adyashanti, who has just a beautiful way of letting words through. And that first line spoke to me deeply. Just one simple sentence that can rearrange a life if you let it land. Sometimes I touch your face knowing that it is God. Sometimes, not always, unless you're really connected. Sometimes it's just easy to see it in someone, right? And it's not because the person changed or because we changed, but it's because we, all of a sudden, if only for an instant, we see clearly, we see truly. And in those moments when we see clearly, when we look on another and we see God looking back at us, the world changes. Not magically, although sometimes if you get really proficient at it, it can feel that way. No, it changes for good. And that was not an Alphaba and Galinda nod there. No, it was not. It was deeply literal. When we see people and ourselves as who we truly are, beautifully perfect, resplendent sparks of the divine, and we see that each of us are part of the body of God, the world changes for good, all because of it. Now, here is the distilled truth that arrived for me last night as I sat with all of this. The web is not something we are trying to build. It is something we are trying to stop tearing. Let that be with you for a bit. The love, that web, that connectedness we are talking about is something we are trying to stop tearing. Because most of us don't realize that we're tearing it. We think we're having opinions. We're being honest. We're being right. We're protecting ourselves. And listen, sometimes boundaries are wise, right? Sometimes discernment, to use a power word I borrowed from my friend Dan, sometimes discernment is holy. But tearing the web doesn't require cruelty, hatred. No, it often happens through something far more ordinary. Dismissiveness, sarcasm, if it's not funny, contempt, labeling, dehumanizing, speaking about people as if they are problems, judging someone's entire being based on one behavior, treating our nervous system reactions like they're absolute truth. We are not our bodies. And here's the liberating truth. Most of this tearing is unconscious, and it is forgivable. Because you can't stop tearing what you don't realize you're doing, right? So today is not about blame, it's about sight. Because now's where it gets fun. This is what I want you to leave with, okay? Every moment of contact that you make is a filament. Every single one of it is a strand for you to weave or tear apart. Every time you touch a life, a human, animal, plant, the earth itself, something holy is placed in your hands. Not in a woo-woo way, okay? In a real way, a real energetic way. A vibration goes out and it's received by all. A tone is set and the whole world resonates. The field adjusts. And what do I mean when I say a real way? You already know this because you've all felt it, okay? You have walked into a room where someone is tense, or someone just argued and suddenly you're tense and you don't know why. Anybody been there? You've talked to somebody calm during a moment of tension and you felt yourself exhale. Yeah? You've been met with kindness and you felt your whole body soften. That is the web. That is the body Paul is talking about. That is the law that Ernest Holmes is talking about. That is the recognition Adyashanti is talking about. So here's the invitation for you. Without weight, no pressure. You are already building the web. The invitation is to do it consciously. That's it. Not harder, not better. Consciously. This week, I spent a whole lot of time at the hospital with my father. For those of you who don't know, my dad had a few falling spells this week. And one of those falls resulted in a call to paramedics. And it turns out that he fractured a couple of ribs And it also turns out that an infection in his body is responsible for the falls, as well as the very, very significant mental fogginess and confusion I saw when I got there. And as I sat by his bedside for many long hours, reassuring and comforting him, I was reminded of something very simple. Sometimes the strongest filament, we'll call it, the strongest strand, the strongest connection you can offer, it isn't advice or fixing or words. It's presence. It's holding a hand. It's soothing a furrowed brow. It's a calm voice, a gentle steadiness, patience, compassion, not as performance, as love. And when I watched him settle, simply because he realized he wasn't alone in the fog, when I watched him allow a few, very few blessed minutes of sleep, simply because my touch told him that I was near, I thought to myself, this is it. This is the message. This is what it means to be the web weaver, or from last week's talk, a webster. It's not about controlling the web. It's not about managing it. It's not about figuring it out and formulating a plan or exploiting it. It's not about hanging out at gas stations and hoping to repeat Dustin's experience from last week so that you can bring home a statue. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go to our YouTube channel and check out last week's talk. It is about strengthening your presence, being fully there, fully aware. So I want to offer you a practice this week, not a to-do list, just a noticing, okay? I am calling it the exhale practice. It's 2 questions, okay? When you meet someone, anyone, know them or not, ask yourself gently, what am I adding to the web right now? Wherever you go this week, someone will be affected by your presence. And as you encounter each, ask yourself, through this moment with me, will they tighten or will they exhale? Okay? Please don't turn that into self-judgment. The simple fact that you're asking within says that you're doing extraordinary work. Just let it make you present, okay? Because a present person is a powerful person. That is one of the truest sentences I will ever say. And I want you to expand this whole practice beyond people. Because some of you asked for that, and you're right. You know how I roll. Snow White and I are like this. It's how you treat your dog when it stands in the way of every possible thoroughfare in your home. We have one of those. It is how you treat your cat when it's purring and it's has a little too much claw in it. We have a new garden cat in here named Thomas, by the way, and he gets a little, he really likes his cuddles, but he's got some nails. It is how you care for a plant. It is how you speak to the cashier. It is how you walk past the stranger. Notice I didn't say a stranger in need. How you walk past a stranger. Do you look at the ground? Or do you acknowledge someone? How you talk about someone who isn't in the room. These are not small moments, not a single one of them. They are the web being built or torn in real time. So here's the blessing I'm going to leave you with. May you walk through this week with giddy awareness. Not because you have another responsibility, but because you have discovered your influence and your inheritance. May you remember that you are not separate. You're not alone. You're not powerless. And if the web is already holding you, then every filament of kindness you lay down is the web holding someone else through you. And that is a gift. So tomorrow, when the first person crosses your path, remember, you are not standing on the web, you are laying silk. And that is holy. Amen.